What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're finally checking out
Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Yes.
At least we think that's how it's pronounced.
I was about to say, I'm not sure if I can properly pronounce this. Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Is that correct?
I say Brunel, but I don't know.
Brunel.
Brunel. Yeah.
Brunel. Anyways, guys, this has been requested so many times. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I've seen check out Isambard Kingdom Brunel in the comments section. So we're finally doing it. This guy is supposedly the genius of the Industrial Revolution.
He was responsible for so almost
many
everything.
Things. Yeah, it seems like it.
Trains, boats. What was the other thing?
I don't know. There was just a ton of stuff.
I'm sure
Bridges, right?
Bridges, yes.
Right? I mean,
probably
just
tunnels. I don't know.
Obviously sounds like a genius.
Yeah.
So guys, enough rambling. Let's dive in here and check out Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
He's likely the most famous engineer in history. In 2002, a BBC poll named Isambard Kingdom Brunel the second greatest Briton of all time, seconds only to, of course, Winston Churchill.
What?
Wow.
Okay, the second greatest Briton of all time.
Which, I mean, based on just what little I know about him in the comments section of the videos we've done, I can see why.
But that's an incredible accomplishment within itself. Wow.
A key player in the Industrial Revolution, Brunel helped turn Britain into a global powerhouse. Under his guidance, railway tracks were laid across England and Wales at a phenomenal rate. Gravity-defying bridges were built, and the first modern ships were engineered. With his trademark top hat and cigar, Brunel became an icon of Britain's early Victorian age, a self-made man propelling his nation forward through sheer talent and entrepreneurial spirit alone. Yet the life of Isambard Kingdom Brunel is more than just the tale of a plucky Brit leading the steam age. The child of a French refugee father, Brunel's life was only made possible by the explosive events reshaping the continent. His early years were marked by war and his father's chronic struggle with debt, and yet his talent for engineering still allowed him to ride the wave of the Industrial Revolution to heights that had never been matched. The Elon Musk of his day, this is the story of both Brunel the man and also the technological explosion that made his name. If your mental image of Isambard Kingdom Brunel is of the quintessential British Victorian,
that's the image I have of him.
It was a shock to realize that he was actually half French. Brunel's father, Mark Brunel, came from a religious farming family in Normandy.
For some reason, this picture right here of him reminds me of a music composer, like Beethoven or
I was literally thinking the same thing.
Probably just because that was the style during that time. And,
it's the coat and the hair.
And the little ruffly.
Yeah, you're right. It probably was the style of that time. Yeah.
In fact, they were so religious that Mark was originally meant to become a priest, although his talent for numbers convinced his family to instead let him train in engineering. Still, the French Brunels were mostly about God, family, and loyalty to their king. And that was a problem because Mark came of age just as France was deciding that kings, they just looked better without their heads. On July the 14th, 1789, a Parisian mob stormed the Bastille prison, firing the opening shot of the French Revolution. When revolution broke out, Mark was serving abroad in the French army, so he missed most of the early highlights, including the Women's March on Versailles and the King's attempted flight to Varennes. But Mark did manage to be back in Paris just in time for the summer of 1792, aka just in time for the merde to really hit the fan. On August the 10th, 1792, a working-class insurrection engulfed Paris. We don't have time to go into the details here, but the upshot is that it changed the course of the revolution. Suddenly, cautious, non-murderous revolution was out, and guillotines and regicide was very much in.
You know, I really want to look into that time period. It seems like it was you
mean the 1700s?
Right around that period of time he's talking about. It seems like there was a lot of strife going on just overall in Europe in general. You know, at least in my head, that's what I feel like. And based off what he's saying here in France, and I think you were seeing some of that probably throughout the whole area. You know what I mean?
Amazingly, all this carnage merely provided a backdrop to Mark's time in Paris. You see, 1792 was the summer that he fell in love. Sophia Kingdom was from a British naval family, the youngest of six.
So was the Sophia.
Remarkably bad timing. Her parents had sent her to Paris that year to practice her French. Instead, she wound up first falling in love and then nearly losing that love to the Reign of Terror. In 1793, Mark's royalist sympathies forced him to flee the country just ahead of Robespierre's goon squad. He bade Sophia goodbye and hightailed it for New York, just one of many refugees fleeing Madame Guillotine. Yes, he was a refugee, so in response to that rather strange question, what have refugees ever contributed to society, the answer is, oh, I don't know, maybe the Industrial Frigging Revolution. While lying low in America, Mark made some contacts in the British Navy. In 1799, he travelled to Britain, married Sophia Kingdom, and started working
they got back together.
on the Portsmouth docks. There he developed a method.
We've heard a lot about Portsmouth. We've checked out a few of the ships that are docked there now, and supposedly it's a huge hub for all of this. So.
Isn't that like part of where we found out some of your family was from, like back in the day?
I don't remember. If
I feel like it was.
I know it was like around the Devon.
That could be off. I don't remember.
Devon and Kent? Was Kent one of them?
I feel like it was, yeah.
For mass-producing rigging blocks, something which gave the Royal Navy a much-needed edge over Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar. In recognition of his help, the Royal Navy paid Mark a handsome sum, handsome enough for him and Sophia to at last settle down and raise a family. On April the 9th, 1806, their son was born. They named him Isambard after an alias that Mark sometimes used. But it wouldn't be just
I was wondering about the name.
Isambard Kingdom Brunel inherited from his father
what a name.
or his
it is a crazy name.
It would also be a Mensa-level grasp of mathematics. It was Mark who instilled in Brunel a love of the language of engineering, an appreciation of what it took to construct something from scratch. Neither father or son could have known it in those early years, but this love affair with engineering, it was destined to change the world.
Look how big those chains are behind him.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty incredible.
In 1815, Napoleon's empire collapsed, ending 26 years of French upheaval. As the monarchy was restored and the threat of revolution faded, Mark made two important decisions. The first was that he would send his son to France to study maths, where the schools were superior. The second was that he was going to do something to help the troops. In the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, tens of thousands of veterans were returning to Britain. But rather than recognize their valor, the government was all like, well, thanks a bunch for all of your help, and here is a whole pile of nothing. Mark was so shocked by the sight of destitute, shoeless British veterans that he decided to build a machine for mass-producing boots for them. Unfortunately,
that was the dad?
And the government responded by throwing him in debtor's prison. For
young
Isambard Kingdom Brunel, this was a formative experience. His father was as good an engineer as he would become, and yet here Mark was, languishing in prison because he didn't understand business. It was a mistake that Brunel swore he would never make.
Wait, I don't understand.
I don't get it either.
We gotta go back because I don't get how making a machine to produce boots for homeless veterans would put you in jail.
Yeah, I don't understand that either, guys.
Like a bad business decision, but
hold on.
Was that he was going to do something to help the troops. In the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, tens of thousands of veterans were returning to Britain. But rather than recognize their valor, the government was all like, well, thanks a bunch for all of your help, and here is a whole pile of nothing. Mark was so shocked by the sight of destitute, shoeless British veterans that he decided to build a machine for mass-producing boots for them. Unfortunately, he super overspent, and the government responded by throwing him in debtor's prison.
Debtor's prison.
Okay, so
this was a formative experience. His father was as good an engineer as he would become, and yet here Mark was, languishing in prison because he didn't understand business.
That's sad.
Debtor's prison. Okay, that's... I know nothing about that. I think I've heard something about that before, but I know nothing about that. It's like... It's so foreign to me to be thrown in prison because you went into debt, or was the debt owed to the government? Like,
maybe.
But even still, like today, you wouldn't ever hear someone going to prison because they owed a large debt to the government, usually, unless they had like fraud or something, obviously. So I don't quite understand.
They didn't play around back then.
They didn't. It sounds like. Maybe that's something we should look into, something about debtor's prison. I know nothing about it, guys. Let us know in the comments.
If it was that big a deal or not.
Yeah, I don't know. If it was a big deal and it's something that would be interesting for us to look into, let us know in the comments.
It was a mistake that Brunel swore he would never make. Yet, even a spell in debtor's prison wasn't enough to keep Mark out of the engineering game. In 1825, Mark asked his son, now back in Britain and better trained than ever, to help him on a great construction project, possibly the greatest that London had ever seen. They were going to tunnel underneath the Thames. At this point in history, London was one of the busiest ports in the world, yet getting goods from its docks to the south of England was an unbelievable cluster headache. First, merchandise had to be loaded onto mule-drawn carts, then it had to be taken across London Bridge at a snail's pace. The idea of tunneling under the Thames to forge an alternative route was not new, but it was truly thought to be impossible.
Yeah, can you fathom how big of a deal that would have been at that time?
Yeah, without the equipment, really.
Like that was probably a mind-boggling feat at that point. I mean,
well, he said it was thought to be impossible.
Right. I can see why.
Now Mark and Brunel were going to make it happen. Construction on the Thames Tunnel began in 1825, and immediately it turned into a bit of a nightmare. There were leakages, ventilation problems, floods, not to mention it was all so slow going that it constantly teetered on the verge of financial disaster. At one point, money got so low that Mark opened it up to tourists, hiring brass bands to play as people wandered the unfinished tunnel. But while the tunnel was a major migraine for father and son, it would also be their making. On Mark's side, the difficulties led him to invent the world's first tunneling shield, a concept that is still in use today. On Brunel's side, the route to greatness was just a bit more twisty. In 1828, part of the tunnel ceiling collapsed and the Thames came flooding in. Now, the Thames may be small by global river standards, but it's still not something you want to have crashing down on your head. 6 workers were killed in the ensuing flood. It would have been even more had Brunel not gone charging in to help the miners, saving lives in the process. But while Brunel, being a hero, was great and all, the important part is that his heroism left him injured. Indeed, he was so badly injured that he had to convalesce for a year. As Mark tried fruitlessly to gather more money to drain the tunnel and continue digging, Brunel lay up at home, bored out of his skull.
Okay, so
this restive state.
So when he's saying Brunel, he's talking about Isambard?
I think so. I think he's separated them because I think both their last names would have been Brunel, I guess, right?
Right.
So I'm guessing he's just calling Isambard Brunel and Mark his dad. But not only does it sound like they were both geniuses, obviously that's where Isambard got his love for engineering and mathematics and whatnot, but also it sounds like they were both really good guys. The dad is sitting here making a machine to help the soldiers because the government wasn't doing anything for the veterans, and then Isambard's running in to actually save workers, and he is severely injured doing so. I mean, that shows that they were more than just really intelligent and great engineering. They also had good hearts.
They were doling it out to everyone else and just standing back.
They had really good hearts.
Yeah. That something caught the young man's eye. The city of Bristol was holding a design competition for a bridge crossing the Avon Gorge right next to the affluent suburb of Clifton. So Brunel decided to enter, and you won't be surprised to learn that he definitely won. Today, the Clifton Suspension Bridge is one of the Victorian.
I've heard of this!
That's that bridge we were seeing in the distance on the video with the... what are those? What am I going to call them? Penguins? Not penguins. We checked it out recently on the
seals.
The seals, yeah. You remember?
We saw this?
We saw it in the background. We were like, "What is that? That looks so awesome!" And I believe it's the Clifton Suspension Bridge.
Suspension Bridge. That is beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
Engineering, a vast span that's emblematic of Bristol. If you want to know how it looked during Brunel's time, though, just concentrate very hard and picture absolutely nothing. That's because, like the Thames Tunnel, the Clifton Suspension Bridge was yet another Brunel project that ran completely over budget and wound up getting abandoned. But while the Thames Tunnel would become an albatross around Mark's neck that dragged him down until its eventual completion in 1841, the Clifton Bridge had the opposite effect on Brunel. Building it resulted in him being introduced to the great and good of Bristol. And the great and good of Bristol just so happened to be looking for someone to build their first railway. Oh. So here's something you need to know about 1830s Britain. The country was in the process of going absolutely railway mad. In the early part of the 19th century, there had been a boom in canal and road building as cities started to connect up. But no sooner had most of Britain bet big on canals than everything changed. In 1829, Robert Stephenson successfully tested his rocket, effectively the first steam train. That same
steam train.
Running the line between Liverpool and Manchester. Before long,
Okay, that is incredible. I love the look of this.
Yeah, that's cool.
I would like to see this in action.
The first steam train.
The entire north was moving to the shrill whistle of steam. Down south in Bristol, a fear began to grow that a lack of railway would soon demote them from major port to arseholes from Hicksville. And that was how, in 1833, Isambard Kingdom Brunel found himself contracted by the Great Western Railway Company to build the first line connecting Bristol to London. This was an incredible project. Bear in mind that Brunel was only 27.
Oh, wow.
Bridge running out of funds and the Thames Tunnel still stalled. Brunel.
Do you realize how big of a deal that is?
Man, that makes me feel like a loser.
like imagine what he had already accomplished already.
Yeah.
And at 27, he is going to have this amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Granted, people grew up a lot faster back then, a lot sooner, but...
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, wow.
Paul knew that this was his chance to make his mark. So he decided he wasn't just going to build a normal railway line, he was going to go back and redesign everything from first principles. That meant designing those same luxury carriages himself, designing the locomotive that would pull them. It also meant designing iconic stations like London's Paddington and Bristol's Temple Meads. It was huge undertaking, one that would guarantee Brunel finally stepped out of Mark's shadow. It was also very nearly his final job. Brunel may have been an unmatched genius at designing stuff like Paddington Station and the Great Western Line itself, but he was an absolute schmuck at designing locomotives. In the late 1830s, tests using Brunel's engines were so disastrous that he came this close to getting his ass fired. In the end, though, everyone figured that firing Brunel would be throwing the baby out with the mediocre locomotives.
He was so good at everything else.
Promised to never ever try engine design ever again. And that was fine by Brunel. He already had his sights set on something much grander than mere steam trains. He was going to get into shipbuilding. Although Brunel married...
So this man literally created some of these stations as well, some of these iconic stations as well.
Yeah, I didn't realize
I had no idea.
Married Mary Elizabeth Horsley in July 1836, she spent most of their marriage dismissed as a mere trophy wife. There may have been a fragment of truth to this. No matter what he might say to the contrary, Brunel's first love wasn't Mary or even their children. It was working on grand projects. In the early days of the Great Western Railway, Brunel announced to the directors that he had a plan for an extension to the line. We like to imagine a board of stuffy old dudes with maybe monocles asking incredulously if Brunel meant to build a line all the way into Wales. When Brunel told them he actually wanted to open a connection to America, we can only hope that a dozen monocles simultaneously popped out and dropped into a dozen cups of tea.
Through ships.
Brunel's vision was to build the first steamship capable of crossing the Atlantic, a feat at the time thought to be impossible. So,
okay.
He wanted a train that would cross. Like,
no, a steamship.
A steamship. I thought it said train. No, a steamship. I was really confused if he was going to build the railway across the ocean or have to go on water.
Let me go back because, yeah.
Was asking incredulously if Brunel meant to build a line all the way into Wales.
A line?
When Brunel told them he actually wanted to open a connection to America, we can only hope that a dozen monocles simultaneously popped out and dropped into a dozen cups of tea. Brunel's vision was to build the first steamship capable of crossing the Atlantic, a feat at the time thought to be impossible. Some bozos had done the calculations and concluded that any steamship trying to cross would require so much fuel that it would become too heavy to sail. But Brunel was certain that they were wrong. And well, now Now he was going to put his money where his mouth was. In 1834, Brunel set about designing and building his steamer. Named the SS Great Western, the ship was a wooden-hulled paddle steamer, not unlike something you might see making its way down the Mississippi.
Wow.
Incredibly, Brunel did this with zero experience at shipbuilding, but rather than becoming a planet-sized catastrophe, it became a game-changing success. In 1838, the finished Western made her maiden voyage to New York. Just as Brunel had predicted, she didn't run out of fuel, arriving in the Big Apple with over 200 tons to spare.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Good on him. How would you feel being one of the first passengers on that ship or boat?
With a man that obviously was a genius in a lot of areas, but he had no experience in shipbuilding.
Yeah, like
and
the first of
and if I know that,
it'd
I'm
be a
like,
little scary.
Okay, well, I guess we'll go. Especially at the time, crossing the Atlantic in this way was
much
obviously
more serious.
Yeah, it was big.
Because you didn't have rescue services or anything. So.
Right, much bigger deal than it would be, now. So
I mean, it's still a big deal, but
I mean, if you're scared of going on the ocean, I suppose. Yeah. Which I think you are a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I hate.
Just being out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could have been the start of a lucrative new venture for the Great Western Company. Had they focused on building more Westerns, they could have cornered the transatlantic passenger market. But Brunel hadn't built the Western as a means. He'd built it as a proof of concept.
That's just a prototype?
Would be what came next. Just 1 year after the Western
We've seen that
voyage,
one.
Brunel got to work.
Oh yeah, that's Great Britain.
We've heard it said that this was the first modern ship. Everything about it was a testament to the Industrial Revolution, from its iron hull to its pioneering screw-propelled engine. It was also big, so big that when Brunel launched the Britain in July 1843, it was too big to get out of the Bristol docks.
Wow.
It was only thanks to a record-breaking high tide in December 1844 that the monster ship was able to make it out into the ocean. Unfortunately, she wouldn't spend very long at sea, though. On September the 22nd, 1846, the captain of the Britain ran her aground on the coast of Ireland, possibly while he was drunk. When Brunel visited the site of the disaster, he angrily exclaimed, "She's lying like a useless saucepan kicking about on the most exposed shore, with no more effort or skill applied to protect the property than the said saucepan would have received."
This is his quote?
Right.
I love the language and just the way people talk.
That's a quote?
I love it.
Accident and subsequent salvage operation bankrupted the Great Western Steamship Company. While their railway arm would survive, the dream of cornering the transatlantic market, it was over. A rival company swooped in and bought the salvaged SS Great Britain, taking it out of Brunel's hands forever. It was the sort of titanic failure that would have acted as a warning to any other great inventor. A warning not to keep overreaching with mad projects like Don Quixote tilting at some steam-powered windmill. But did Brunel take that warning?
No.
It's a testament to Brunel's mad genius that pretty much everything that happened to him gave him some idea for an invention. For example, in 1843, he tried to do a magic trick for his children, only to wind up accidentally swallowing a coin and getting it stuck in his windpipe. So Brunel designed a machine that would spin him around so fast that it would shake the coin loose. When that failed, it was Mark who saved the day by suggesting strapping Brunel to a board, holding him upside down and shaking him. And with that, the coin finally came free.
What? I'm confused. Okay, so was it lodged in his windpipe, but just not enough to cut off the air completely?
He's like, well, I have this coin lodged in my windpipe.
Let me go get to work.
Let me go get to work and invent something to... Wow, that's incredible. That just kind of shows his love of just engineering in general, and just the spirit behind him to have the forethought to, when you've got this issue going on, to be like, well, I'm going to invent something to spin me around really fast.
And then it ended up he turned upside down and shook really hard.
Wow, man, this guy's a character.
Yeah.
But even this high-speed spinning machine would have nothing on the madness of Brunel's next project. In 1844, the Great Western Railway finally reached the city of Exeter. By now, Brunel-built track was crawling all over the West Country, into Wales, and up from Bristol into the Midlands. But reaching Exeter posed a problem. Beyond lay the wild expanse of Dartmoor, a place so hilly that getting normal trains to go over it would be a challenge. But Brunel, being Brunel, decided to try anyway. In 1843, Brunel had visited Dalkey in Ireland, where he'd seen an atmospheric railway. And no, that's not a railway with a really great atmosphere, but a railway that uses a vacuum-sealed tube to propel its carriages up an impressively steep gradient.
Back then?
It was this that Brunel decided to build across Dartmoor. To be clear, this was an insane undertaking. The Dalkey atmospheric railway worked.
Oh, you see the tube?
Oh, I do. I guess so. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. It's kind of interesting they would have that type of technology back then as well.
And for just 3 kilometers. By contrast, Brunel was hoping to build one that extended over 80 kilometers. The technology was simply untested on such a scale, sort of like if the government announced out of the blue tomorrow that they were going to build a hyperloop connecting New York and Washington, D.C. Nevertheless, Brunel insisted on it, pushing ahead at full steam, or rather, should that be full vacuum? This was despite protests from Great Western. Amazingly, Brunel's gamble worked. Well, it did at first. By early 1848, the first atmospheric railway operating on a regular timetable opened between Exeter and Newton Abbot. On good days, its trains were capable of hitting 110 kph. Wow, and for a moment, it looked like Brunel had really pulled it off. But no, as impressive as they were, all of Brunel's great projects were doomed to end in failure. Almost as soon as the line had opened, the salty Devon sea air started eating away at the leather lining of the vacuum tubes, causing them to decay. When the company tried resealing them with grease, hungry rats chewed through them further. By 1849, the atmospheric railway was in such a bad shape that Brunel himself recommended scrapping it altogether and starting again with regular track. It was a colossal waste of money, one that Brunel was wholly responsible for. Yes, it was in the aftermath of this disaster that we see some of Brunel's greatness. Always a moral man, Brunel personally paid for the atmospheric railway's failures out of his own pocket rather than making Great Western pick up the tab.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Once that was done, he didn't give up on his Devon line, but kept right on working on it, eventually extending track all the way into Cornwall via the breathtaking...
Look at that! Hold on.
What's that called?
Hold on.
Here, just do this.
All the way into Cornwall via the breathtaking Royal Albert Bridge.
Royal Albert Bridge.
Royal Albert Bridge. I want to get a look at this real quick.
Yeah, I want to see it. That's crazy.
Wow. Up, Brunel. That is cool, man.
I bet that was added later. The IK Brunel.
Oh, probably. I'm guessing this was. But I'm just looking at the way this is designed. It's just incredible. Wow. This is something, I think on the channel... I've only looked at one bridge before, a really amazing bridge in Scotland. I want to look at more bridges. I find bridges fascinating.
I didn't see it with you, did I?
No, this was before you came on the channel. It's been a long time. But yeah, I would love to look at some bridges like this. Just some of the most amazing bridges you guys have in the UK. Or
something about his biggest design.
Sure. That's great too. I'm just talking specifically about bridges in general right now, though. But I would love to see some really cool ones.
Royal Albert Bridge. Big ideas and zany schemes aside, Brunel was a tireless engineer of the ordinary, one who linked up so much of West and Middle Britain in his lifetime that it helped make the nation an industrial powerhouse. While the railroads of America would be built by robber barons like Cornelius Vanderbilt, who cheated and swindled, Brunel laid Britain's tracks while never losing sight of his moral compass.
That's cool.
That's really cool. Is that him?
As more of Britain vanished beneath his rail track, Brunel began to turn his mind back to his greatest failure. The SS Great Britain had been ambitious, but not overly so. What if the reason it was seen as such a failure wasn't because Brunel had aimed too high, but rather too low? What if next time he built something even bigger? The result of that crazed thought was the SS Great Eastern, the single biggest shipbuilding project ever undertaken. Brunel's plan was to build a ship that could make it all the way from Britain to India without having to stop and refuel.
Wow.
Maybe it could go even further. But Brunel realized that he couldn't build such a Leviathan alone, so he called in expert shipbuilder John Scott Russell to help him. In no time at all, though, the two ambitious men would grow to despise one another. Work began on the Eastern in 1854 at London's Isle of Dogs. Everything about the project was so vast that it challenged everything Brunel knew about engineering. For example, Brunel figured out that a headlong launch into the Thames would be impossible for a ship of this size, so they'd always have to launch her sideways. Unfortunately, when the time came in 1857, the Eastern was so heavy that she distorted the slipway, resulting in the massive ship becoming stuck halfway.
Oh my Lord. I can't even imagine the undertaking that would be.
I can't either. As someone who doesn't really have any experience with ships,
or engineering.
Right. It's incredible to see things like this. I thought it's just mind boggling to me.
It would just be very daunting, I think, the thought of how the heck are we going to pull this off?
I know. I mean, just look at this. I mean, I understand that today, what you're looking back at 100 and some years ago, isn't nearly as complex as it seems.
Seems like it to me.
But looking at it today, I mean, even today, it's just mind-boggling how they accomplish things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get the damn thing in the river,
Look at
Brunel
that.
was forced to invent a battery of hydraulic presses that would nudge the Eastern out of its rut. This was even harder than it sounds. By 1857, Brunel was suffering from a kidney disease, a condition that left him in chronic pain. Yet finish his hydraulic press as he did. Before long, the SS Great Eastern was finally afloat. The biggest ship in human history, a record she held for 4 decades, began her maiden voyage in early September 1859. Brunel himself was on the deck. This would have been his greatest triumph.
Look at this.
Time and time again in this video, Brunel's grandest projects were always destined to end in some kind of disaster. Still, no one could have predicted just how great a disaster would accompany the Eastern's launch. Stood on the deck of his monster ship that blustery day, Isambard Kingdom Brunel suffered a massive stroke, some say a seizure, and collapsed. Although he clung to life for another few days, his body was really just delaying the inevitable. Brunel died on September the 15th, 1859. He was 53 years old.
Wow.
In the wake of Brunel's death, his patrons in Bristol went on a fundraising drive determined to build a suitable monument in his honour. That monument became the Clifton Suspenders.
Oh, that's... Okay.
Brunel's original designs in 1864. It would become the engineer's lasting legacy in the city. But what about the rest of the world? At the moment Brunel died, he was considered a great engineer, but one who was plagued by hubris, who wasted his talents on unworkable projects like the atmospheric railway. The Victorians actually considered his father, Mark, to have been a better engineer despite his own flaws. Against the guy who'd invented the tunnel shield, Brunel was just a mere dreamer. But time moves on and fashions changed. As the dour Victorian era gave way to the 20th century, people began to realize just how inspiring a dreamer can be. Before long, Brunel's maddest projects came to be recognized not only as failures, but as heroic attempts to shape the future. Today, Brunel is not one Victorian engineer among many. He is the Victorian engineer, the man who was to the steam age what Da Vinci was to the Renaissance. While the truth is a little more complicated, there's no doubt that Brunel deserves this reassessment. He was the child of a refugee father from a family saddled with debt who nonetheless managed to transform the face of Britain, making it into a modern industrial powerhouse. He may not have been the father of the Industrial Revolution or even its main contributor, but Isambard Kingdom Brunel showed humanity what it was capable of, and he deserves his place as one of the greatest Britons in history.
Wow. Guys... Man, this guy must have lived by the motto, go big or go home. I mean, he really did.
Probably not in those words, but...
No, but how amazing. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. It seems that he was constantly plagued by a lot of his stuff not, seeing itself to fruition or actually accomplishing what he ultimately set out to do. But what ultimately made him great was his greatness of thought, his ability to think ahead of his time. And so looking back, that's why he's, a lot of what he started was accomplished later.
Yeah, without him actually knowing his contribution.
Yeah, but without him having those initial grand thoughts and belief that all this stuff could be done, it was possible, it probably would have took a lot longer to see those things come to fruition.
And how brave you must be to even speak these things aloud and attempt them, because
really,
the possibility of failure is so high, but yet still anyway. Forging on and trying, that's really commendable.
It seems like he really cared about people in general. It seemed
and doing the right thing.
Yeah, him and his father. It seemed like they were both good men. But This was really fascinating, guys. Definitely a bit different than I was thinking in my head. He really pressed for more grand things than I really even understood. But also, I didn't quite grasp how many times he started something so big and then ultimately it failed, and he got himself back up and kept on going. I mean, like, the fortitude of this man was incredible, right? I mean, it really was. Incredible, man. I'm glad we checked this out. Let us know in the comments what you think we should check out next. But I think that's it for us today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow us on our journey. Until next time, peace.